And everyone needed to make a little money. Now, the battles may have been going on back east in the Civil War, but there were some Oregon men here who didn't necessarily want to be caught in the fight. They didn't want to be hooked into the militia or become a member of the volunteers, which eventually did happen. And so they convinced their parents to give them a grub stake. I can hear Julian, my grandson, trying to talk us in to giving us a little money so that he could go out to the Salmon River mines. Everyone else was going. In this house, though, in this home, sweet home, Charlie Applegate was having none of it. He was the wealthiest man, as I said, in Douglas County or Umpqua County for many years. And they didn't happen from these fly-by-night things like gold mining. So he put his foot down. The Applegate boys in this house were not allowed to go. But Jesse Applegate, over there, where Mount Yoncalla is, Jesse, he was a little more tolerant and mellow. And he said of his sons, go ahead and go, boys. Things aren't going so well here. Go ahead and go to the mines. And they did. Hen Lane was an instrumental person in getting everybody to get itchy feet and leave the Yoncalla Valley. Partly because he was trying to butter up his, he hoped, future father-in-law, Charlie Applegate, and he'd gotten sheep on shares, 600 head that he was going to take care of. And then that bad storm came, and that bad winter came, and the sheep got worms, and the sheep foundered, and they were bringing the little lambs in the houses, in the front room right here. This is how they tried to survive in that winter, and they lost their shirts. And Hen Lane did not impress his prospective father-in-law. So he skedaddled to the mines, and along with everyone else was tearing up the rail fences to make fires along the way to keep them warm. There were some pretty angry farmers in the Willamette Valley. Up at the mines, they didn't do much good, but they decided they would write letters home to the girls in the family, because the girls were bound to be impressed by the stories. One of the girls was Harriet Applegate, who lived here, who was 16. She was an aspiring artist. Some of her artworks, some of you saw on the house tour. And she was pining because it turns out that she'd had a little agreement that we're not sure how deep it went with old Hen Lane. But Hen Lane didn't take his fiddle with him. It was too precious. Maybe he thought he might get tempted and gamble it away. So he left it here in Oregon. And he left it with Gertrude Applegate, Jesse Applegate's daughter. Gertrude. Oh, there's another story. But just suffice it to say that Gertrude Applegate, the son of a pro-unionist, a man who had canvassed for Abraham Lincoln, Gertrude Applegate fell in love with a secesh. A secesh is short for secessionist. So in this family full of pro-union people, very patriotic people, she deeply wounded and offended her father. And eventually, Gertrude, who was the keeper of Hen Lane's fiddle when he went to the mines, knew that what she was going to do was to elope with her secessionists. And she did. She took a stagecoach with James Fay, little Jimmy Fay they called him, little banty rooster of a man, that's what they'd say to be insulting about him. They went down to that hotbed of Copperheadism in Jacksonville, Oregon. But before Gertrude ran away, she called John Applegate, her brother, and said, or her cousin, excuse me, said, John, you come over here. John, remember, was the kid who had to stay home, the man who had to stay home. His father didn't want him to go. And John Applegate said, what's the matter? And she said, I want you to keep Hen's fiddle. Why, John said. She said, well, I've played it. I've learned how to play it, because there were women fiddlers in the family, too. I've learned how to play it, and I just think it's time for you to have it. She wanted it to be in someone's care, because she knew she wasn't coming back. John had the fiddle and he brought it over here, probably that way. There's a road that comes from the Jesse place over this way. He came on home with it and he said, I've got Henry Lane's fiddle. Buck Applegate, his little brother, was excited. Buck was 10 years old, very talented. Eventually, Hen Lane's fiddle and being close to it inspired Buck Applegate right here in this house to make two fiddles, twin fiddles, for his daughters, Eva and Evea Applegate, who were identical twins. Now, some of you have had a chance to see these fiddles, and I won't talk too much about them now. But the thing that's important is how art can inspire people, and how just being around that Hen Lane fiddle as a young boy inspired Buck Applegate to do something that was pretty remarkable. He didn't go to the internet and get a program how to build fiddles. He actually used some cabinet maker tricks on these fiddles that he made, but they're fine fiddles as folk instruments nevertheless. And that is something you can hear more about and learn more about by the booklet that we've put together about the fiddles that's over in the other part of the grounds here, and by looking at the fiddles yourself. So I won't belabor that. But I want to say that when that fiddle came into this house, it inspired the whole family. Even old Charlie Applegate, the grump who wouldn't let his boys go to the gold mines, wrote a poem about Buck playing the fiddle. Now my young people, think of a plan to celebrate Christmas the best way you can. Get out your jellies and so forth, fine meats. Invite all your kinfolks to come help you eat. And he goes on to say, let Buck get his fiddle and have a good dance. He says, go on until morning. Your daddy don't care. So it is no wonder that great-granddaddy became a amateur fiddle maker. And so he was inspired, but he's not the only one in the family who was inspired. And I'm going to let Doug take up the rest of this story. I know we have to watch the time, but I'm not sure what the end point is, Perry. Okay. So I'd like to introduce to you the man who's really responsible for this event, because he got a very strange phone call from somebody and who ran out this very story to him, and he had a totally different idea about where this fiddle was from. And so that's important, but also I should tell you that Harriet Applegate died when she was 16 while Hen Lane was away at the mines. And when Hen Lane got a letter at the Salmon River mines letting him know that this lovely young woman was gone, the letter said there wasn't a dry eye in the camp when we heard that Harriet died. And Hen Lane seemed to take it harder than anyone. And he never came back for his fiddle. So if you see a man looking like he's looking for a lost fiddle, kind of a gruff-looking fella, wearing a vest, he had a picture taken of himself and his revolver tucked in the vest. Looks very disreputable. If I'd been Charlie, I would have said, you stay away from Harriet too. But if you see that sort of man with a sad look in his eyes, who maybe lost his shirt and maybe was drinking pretty hard as well as gambling later in his life, that would be Hen Lane. But he left his fiddle in very good hands.
Let me first say that I'm really happy to be here with my wife as well, all the way from Maryland. We actually live south of Annapolis in a town called Davidsonville.
Can you hear, Doug?
Can I hear?
Yeah, good.
Okay, good. So you may wonder why. Oh yes, let me introduce my wife. She's back on on the sitting there waving, and my son Doug too came with us from Chicago area. So glad to have them come as well with the fiddle. Now I guess I need to back up a little bit. Where did the Johnsons come in here with the Applegates? Well, the Applegates, they first came to this area across the Oregon Trail from Missouri in 1843. 4 years later, Malachi Johnson and his wife Delilah, they were neighbors and friends of the Applegates, also lived in Missouri. They came also, and they landed in the same valley, and so they were friends and neighbors here. And with 15 children for the Applegate side and 11 children on the Johnson side, they got to be pretty good buddies over the years. And there were 3 of the siblings on the each side